Hello, my babies.
So sorry for that. I've been just watching too much Poker Stars coverage lately, and I just cut this back from Mr. Joe Stapleton to say things that way. Don't mind me. Regardless of that, I'm Jędrek, as always, and today I wanna talk to you about 5 cards from Innistrad Midnight Hunt that will either see play or I would like to see getting some recognition in modern format. Without further ado, let's get into it. First thing first. So because Innistrad Midnight Hunt as or Hunt, not Hunt, right? Midnight Hunt because there are werewolves hunting humans. Yeah, okay. So Innistrad Midnight Hunt is a standard legal set, and unlike Throne of Eldraine and Theros and Ikoria made us accustomed to, standard sets usually don't have many modern playables. And ever since Wizards started printing sets like Modern Horizons or Modern Horizons 2, I'm very grateful for that because I feel that they can just shake things up in Modern significantly every like 2 years if they will keep printing supplemental Modern products every 2 years. That's have been the case for like 10 years now, more or less, if you count Modern Horizons 2, because or all the Modern Master sets, excuse me, because first Modern Masters was like spring of 2013, and then we've got Modern Masters 2 in 2015, Modern Masters 3 in 2017, and then Modern Horizons 1 2019, and the other one just a few months ago. So if WotC decides to follow this trend of printing sets that are somewhat focused on modern every 2 years, I think that's enough of a shakedown to still let people play with their favorite toys for enough time. And I'm really glad that they don't want to just cause an earthquake every few months, because I don't think that's something that's desirable in the format, especially format heralded for its stability as modern. Or maybe those claims aren't as true anymore, but for years, modern was advertised as a format in which you can play your deck forever, basically, once you build it. So even if that's not true anymore, I like seeing some major shifts, not as often as new sets releases. So back to the original point, because it's a standard legal set and there aren't many super good cards for modern. Dare I say there are 0 super good cards for modern, but there are some decent cards. This list is not only top 5 cards that are most likely to see play in modern, because I think there are some cards that I omitted from the list that might be a bit more likely to see some modern play. For example, there are cards like Cathartic Pyre. For those of you who are not still familiar with the new cards, I get it. I've barely watched the spoiler throughout the spoiler season because it seems like we are getting a never-ending stream of spoilers these days, and I just reviewed the spoiler before compiling this list. So Cathartic Pyre is a 2-mana instant for 1 and red that has 2 modes. You can either deal 3 damage to a creature or planeswalker, or discard up to 2 cards, then draw that many cards. So this is like a fringe playable. If you for some reason don't want to splash Thrilling Discovery in your dredge deck, you can play this. It can also kill creatures. It's kind of annoying that it can't kill the creature you want to kill the most, which is Sanctifier on Vec. But still, like, I think this is a card that can see more play than some of the cards on my list. But I think the cards that I have in there are, I think that three or four of those cards will be the cards that see the most play, and then the fifth card on this list is something I would like to see play. So without any further ado, number 5, the card that might not see any play in Modern, but if it does, it will be very important in its archetype, and I would be glad to see it, is Champion of the Perished, which is an obvious homage to Champion of the Parish. It's a 1 black mana for a 1/1 zombie that grows every time another zombie enters the battlefield. You put a 1/1 counter on Champion of the Perished. A very, very good flavor, in my opinion. A very nice. I'm a sucker for a good reference, and this is as good as it gets in Magic, I think. I don't think I think this is my favorite Magic reference to another card on a card that I've ever saw. It's just so well designed, so clean. I really enjoy it. And you know what I also enjoyed? A disruptive monocolored or heavily into one color aggro decks. It is not something that I've been known for, I guess, but anytime I get to play Standard, this is a type of deck I like to play, unless there's a very, very good control deck, of course. But I top-8ed Polish Nationals in 2017 with the almost mono-black splashing red aggro deck, and this type of 1-drop on turn 1, 2 1-drops on turn 2, and then some interaction is a very near and dear to my heart as a playstyle, and I would love for it to be good in Modern. This is a recipe that we know from Pioneer, and it's been a mainstay of Pioneer for almost its entire duration, excluding some first totally broken weeks of Pioneer, when you still could play like Oko and Nexus and stuff like this. But then, after the series of bans, Mono Black aggro was one of the decks that established itself as a strong force in the archetype, something that people have to keep in mind. And it stayed that, I think to this day, I'm not really following Pioneer all that well, but every now and then I see Thiago Saporito or someone else on Twitter just tweeting that, oh, okay, so I won a challenge or I made top 8 of the PTQ or whatever with Mono Black. Sometimes it's, I guess, vampires, so it might be a bit of observance bias or something, but I think Mono Black is still good in Pioneer. And while obviously Pioneer is not as strong as a format, not as powerful as of a format as Modern, there are certain upgrades that you can do to this shell with Modern legal cards that I can see Zombie becoming a competitive Modern deck. First of all, there's a bunch of different ways in which you can play zombies. You can just go all out on aggression. There are, I think, 20 decent aggressive 1-drops you can play in zombies, because you can, of course, play Champion of the Perished or Perished. This is a big one. And you can play Crypt Breaker, Gravecrawler, Carrion Feeder. Crypt Breaker is not really aggressive, but it makes creatures, I guess, so it's also pretty great. So it's 16, and then you have Dread Wanderer if you want to play aggressive stuff, as well as Diregraph Ghoul if you are really into some 1 mana 2 X's on Tribe. So you can just go super low, super lean with this. You can proceed with some more combo-centric approach. There are a bevy of ways to combo with zombies. You can play cards like Rally the Ancestors or Rally of the Ancestors. I think it's Rally the Ancestors, but I'm not sure. Return to Ranks, Altar of Dimension from Hogak, Goblin Bombardment, of course, probably the most promising sacrifice outlet, because it also plays well into the aggressive nature of creature decks. Or there is also a combo way of Liliana, Untouched by Death, and Trembling Gust, which is coupled with any sort of sacrifice outlet and payoff, like, for example, Carrion Feeder. So how the combo works, for those of you who are not familiar with Liliana Untouched by Death, which is a card that's, I think it never saw any play in competitive Magic. I don't think it was even good in limited because it's very zombie focused, so you had to have like a bunch of zombies in your deck, which I don't think really happened in the whichever core set it was in. It's a 4-mana planeswalker for 2 and double black. It starts with 4 counters and its ultimate only costs 3. And it's you may cast zombies from your graveyard this turn. You are not exiling any zombies that is getting put into your graveyard after the fact, like with Yagwil or Past in Flames or similar effect. So you can keep replaying the same zombie. And there is Trembling Gas, which is a zombie from Adventures in Forgotten Realms. That is 1 black for a 1/1, and when it dies, it either creates a treasure, or I think it gives -1/-1 to target creature until end of turn, or it gives something a -1/-1 counter. This part is not that relevant. The treasure part is relevant because if you have Sacrifice Outlet, you can just keep replaying it over and over again. And if your Sacrifice Outlet is Goblin Bombardment, you just kill your opponent. If it's Carrion Feeder, you will get an arbitrarily large Carrion Feeder. You will also grow your Champion of the Perished to whichever size you desire, so you get the gist. And then finally, you can play the more like recursive, grindy zombie deck with stuff like Relentless Dead, or you will probably play the Undead Ogre in most zombie decks, but this type of like grindy stuff, because the reason that tribal decks are not very good is because if you kill their important creatures, if your opponent kills your important creatures, you are just left with a bunch of not very impressive stuff. So the key to zombies success is either being super low to the ground that you can never trade down on mana when they are killing your creatures, so you just play all one drops basically, or you have some form of stickiness and resiliency, which zombies are known for, Gravecrawler. So basically, if you play a Gravecrawler, every zombie, like if you have a Gravecrawler in play, you attack with it, obviously your opponent kills it, and then every zombie you play is just basically coming with a free Gravecrawler, so they can't really grind through it that easily. Or if you have Undead Ogre and you're just drawing cards when they are killing your zombies, or Relentless Dead, or some other sort of recurring zombie theme like Dread Wanderer or whatever. I think there might be something in it, and I'm excited for people to try it out because, as I said before, this is the type of deck that I enjoy myself. Okay, number 4 on the list is Sunset Revelry, which is a leaner version of Timely Reinforcements, let's say. So it's 2 mana, 1 and white for a sorcery that checks 3 conditions, whether your opponent has more of a given resource than you: life, creatures, and cards in hand. So if they have more life than you, or an opponent, I guess. So it's for suited to EDH. I think. I think the wording is commander or EDH friendly, because on Timely it says you have to have fewer things than your opponent, and you have multiple opponents, you have to be the one with fewest stuff. And on Sunset Revelry, if at least one of your opponents has more stuff than you, that's okay. I think that works that way. It's not important for Modern, but yeah. So if an opponent has more life than you, you will gain 4 life. If opponent has more creatures than you, you'll get 2 1/1s. And finally, if opponent has more cards than you in hand, you will draw a card. So at the very, very least, it's a 2/3 of a Timely Reinforcement for 2/3 of the price. And that already is a profitable exchange, I think. I think this card is better than Timely, even if it wasn't drawing cards. I think getting a smaller effect for a smaller amount of mana in a format as powerful as Modern is better. I think it's a sweet spot. I don't think that 1/3 of Timely would be better. Like, if you had a sorcery for 1 white mana that says if your opponent has more life, gain 2. If your opponent has more creature, create a 1/1 token. I don't think it's better than Timely. It's probably the worst of the three. But I do think that Sunset Revelry, even without drawing a card, is something that's better than Timely. And on top of that, you can draw a card. And when you think about it, it's like, but how much often will the aggro deck has more cards in hand than me playing a control deck? Well, the truth is, if you're on the play and you play land and pass the turn, and your opponent plays a 1-drop, passes back to you, if you both kept 7 card hands, or if you both kept the same amount of cards in hand, if you play your second land and Sunset Revelry, you will draw a card because you are on the play. So you have 1 card less than your opponent. And because of that, it's a very nice turn to play. Like, your opponent plays Goblin Guide and attacks you. And on turn 2, you're just gaining for making 2 creatures and draw a card because they attacked you for 2. And you probably fetched or shocked because you knew that you had Sunset Revelry coming up. So yeah, that sounds pretty strong to me. And seeing some people being not very into this card, I think it's quite clearly better than Timely in most cases. Okay, moving forward, Faithful Mending, which is a card that I think was the most hyped card in the set because it's somewhat resembling of Faithless Looting, which is a beloved card by many. So Faithful Mending is an instant for 2 mana, white and blue, with a flashback for 1 white and blue, so 3 mana. And it gives you 2 life, and then you draw 2 and discard 2. So it's very, very obvious. A homage to Faithless Looting, with starting with the name and then going through the effect and flashback and everything. I think a lot of people, when they see a looting effect, they are thinking about decks that utilize the looting effect the best. So stuff like Dredge or Phoenix. And while I would really, really like Phoenix to be a playable deck again in Modern, even though I haven't played it when it was great, but I just like having this type of deck in the format. I think it's pretty good for it to be good. I think that Merktide is somewhat similar to Phoenix because it's a heavy cantrip shell that can easily... it has a very good proactive plan, and you have a lot of cantrips, so you can get a lot of mileage of your sideboard cards. And for example, imagine that people are trying to play stuff like Amulet of Vigor with Primeval Titan. If the best deck in the format is Phoenix with Ether Gas, like, your Titan will never resolve because they will have 2 or 3 Ether Gas in the sideboard and they will have like 20 cantrips. So, yep, this type of stuff. I think it's pretty good in the format because it is very good at stopping a broken linear things. But yeah, I don't think that Phoenix sadly will be that great. I will probably try it myself at some point, but I don't think it will be that great. Similarly with Dredge, I just can't see them playing a 2 mana draw to discard 2 instead of even that Cathartic Pyre that I mentioned earlier, because it requires you to play blue-white in a deck that is mostly red, so that doesn't seem that great. Playing Rainbow Mana Base and Dredge doesn't seem that great either. And while Flashback is undoubtedly a very strong addition to Dredge, you have Ox of Agonas to mill, so I think Faithful Mending will not be playable in Dredge as well. Where I think it might be playable is some sort of control-ish or combo control deck, like, for example, blue-white control. Not because I think that blue-white control these days works best if you are treating it as a prison deck of sorts. So if the metagame calls for playing stuff like Rest in Peace in the main deck, Chalice of the Void in the main deck, even a playset of the Fairy Time Raveler in the main deck, that's not very good in multiples usually. Having a looting effect that you can hold up while you are drawing cards with Archmage's Charm, EOT, or countering stuff with counter, you can basically hold mana and do all the fancy instant speed things that you do in blue-white usually. And then you can discard the hate cards that are not good in any given matchup. Plus, we all know how good looting is in preventing flooding later in the game. If you are just patient with it and you wait on it and you don't just fire it up right off the bat the first time you have to spare mana, but if you actually think about how you want to use the card, I think it might be a pretty strong addition to blue-white in the more prisonish sense of things. I don't think that you want mending in the current blue-white list. I think you might want a bit more hate cards. Like maybe if you are playing 4 chalices, then maybe you want a mending or 2. I don't know. We'll see. And the other of those like combo control-ish shells is Esper Reanimator. I'm not a big believer in Reanimator in Modern in general. I don't think that deck is very strong. I know some people had success with it, but I just don't see it. But maybe playing looting, then you can play Teferi Time Raveler. Maybe you can play some counter magic, and you won't have all those traditional black-white control deck problems or black-white mid-range problems when you can't do stuff about many things. So, yep, I think it might be good in those decks as well. Moving on, number 2 is a card that I don't really have much to talk about, but I think it will be pretty strong, and it's Memory Deluge, which is a 4-mana instance for 2 and double blue, with flashback for 5 and double blue. It says, look at the top X cards of your library, where X is the amount of mana you spend on the card. You choose 2 of those and you put rest on the bottom. So on the front side, you're getting an effect similar to like Factor Fiction or Glimmer of Genius, this type of card. And then you have a splashback that if you pay 7 mana for it, it's effectively Dig Through Time. So I do think that this card is pretty comfortably better than Factor Fiction. And it's quite obvious to me that it is that way. It might sound a bit cocky to say that, but I think once Uro got banned, the fact that Factor Fiction bins stuff to your graveyard is not nearly as important because you also don't have Mystic Sanctuary. So while binning stuff is obviously better than putting it on the bottom of your deck, usually, it's still not that much of a difference in my opinion. And this card is just a heaps of card advantage and card selection. Like, if you draw one of those, you won't lose the game if you can manage to stabilize and just drag the game. If you go turn 4 Memory Deluge and you just choose like lands to hit your land drops up to 7 or interaction that you need to survive, and then you flashback it on 7, it will be enough to win the game most of the time. It will be especially good with Wilderness Reclamation if for some reason we want to play Reclamation. Reclamation as a card is a 4-mana sorcery speed stuff that does not do that much. It pays for itself, obviously, but it's also not that great if you don't have any payoffs. But even if it's not great, it's sure as hell is good with this card, because you can just play it on 4 or on 3 even if you have Growth Spiral. Then you untap, play Deluge, and then next turn you have a land drop, which is 5, and then you double it, so you have 10 mana, so you can Deluge and still have 3 mana up. So yeah, I do think that Memory Deluge is probably the best non-planeswalker source of card advantage for those decks. Like, it's the best draw spell for like slower controller decks. It might even be a good card for a sideboard of like Grixis or Murktide. I don't know. We'll see. And then finally, number 1 on this list, which shouldn't surprise anyone really, because it's also the most like safe and boring choice from the whole set. It's obviously Consider, which is, for those of you who don't know the card, a 1-mana blue instant that surveils one and then draws a card. Effectively surveils. It's not keywording. It's not keyworded. It just says, look at the top cards of your library. You can put it into your graveyard, or you can leave it on top and then you draw. I like not keywording a single card in the set. I think it's clean design. I like it. Not the point of this video. But yeah. It's kind of obvious that it will be strictly better than Opt, and many people says that, but it's not saying much, right? Because being strictly better than Opt doesn't mean anything by itself. Opt wasn't really that played in those recent months, so what are the advantages of the card and where you can see it being played? So the biggest upside of Consider, or the only upside of Consider, compared to Opt, is that you dump the cards to the graveyard instead of putting them on the bottom of your library. So in which cases those things are most important? Obviously, if you want to fuel your graveyard for something. And what are the cards that you want, that wants you to fuel their graveyards? So first and foremost, stuff like Delirium. It's much easier to hit Delirium for Darcy, or for Darcy is pretty good at hitting Delirium at herself, so that's not the best example. But for Unholy Heat, for example, so Delirium for Unholy Heat, targets for Snapcaster Mage, targets for Kolaghan's Command, which is something that's pretty big in Grixis, because fairly often you are somewhat forced to fire those mopey Kolaghan's Command in the shock discard mode at the end of their turn, because you want to use your mana and you have too many cards in hand and stuff like this, and you don't have good targets to recur, or no targets to recur. So consider putting creatures into your graveyard early on for you to rebuy with Kolaghan's Command. It's pretty massive, actually. Also, stuff like Bubble for Lurus. So if you see Bubble with Opt, you kind of don't want to cantrip into Bubble, but also you want Bubble for Lurus. So with Consider, you can get the best of both worlds, because you dig deeper into your deck and you get the card effect immediately. And then you still have Bubble in your graveyard, so that's pretty great. And obviously stuff like Delve. I don't know if Consider will be better than Thoughtscour in Murktide. Some people are saying that it will be. Some people are saying that it definitely won't be. I haven't played Murktide enough to chime in on this. The only thing I will say is that I really, really dislike Thoughtscour in those decks, so I would definitely Consider myself if I was playing Murktide. Okay, so that's it, I believe. To recap, number 5 on this list, Perished Champion of the Perished. Champion of the Perished. Number 4, Sunset Revelry. Number 3, Faithful Mending. Yes. Number 2, Memory Deluge. And number 1, Consider. This list ended. Sorry for that. But yeah. That's it. I don't think that Innistrad, as I've said before, is a really powerful set for Modern, but the cards that we've been given are fairly interesting, and I've liked how the set shaped up. I really like Innistrad as a plane or universe for Magic, and I don't mind getting back to Innistrad every few years, because I've started playing more competitive Magic when the first Innistrad hit, and I've always been fairly nostalgic about Innistrad. So, yep, that's it. Where you can find me on the internet, I am streaming every Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday from around noon to 2 p.m. CET. I'm usually trying to stream for like 4 hours, sometimes 5. Sometimes it's a bit less than that, but I will try and do my best to stream for at least 4 or 5 hours on those days at twitch.tv/tspn. Links are in the description below. As well for Patreon, for my Twitter if you want to follow me there and follow my updates. And yeah, that's it. That's everything I've had to say to you. I hope you'll have a lovely weekend and a lovely time trying those Innistrad cards. Take care. Bye bye. You're the best.